Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together. We have some great people helping us along the way. Deep breaths, everyone. So before we launch into the absolutely necessary topic for today, we're going to be talking about how to talk to kids about anti-Asian violence and racism. I wanted to tell you some really great news. My next book, currently entitled How to Talk to Kids About Anything, I wonder where I got that from, will be published by Sourcebooks in 2022. The contract has been signed, and I am writing, highlighting the tips, scripts, stories, and steps that will make even the toughest conversations easier, from death and divorce to sex, tech, porn, drugs, failure, racism, and more. And my hope is that this book will be a staple on every parent's, coach's, and teacher's bookcase to pull out when conversations are necessary, but words escape us. I'm so honored to be writing this book for you and so privileged to have such amazing experts on the show who are sources for this forthcoming book and, of course, sources for this fabulous podcast. Experts like the one we're having on the show today, so let's get to it. Racism towards Asian Americans is nothing new. However, when the pandemic hit and surges of the COVID virus washed over the world from east to west, racism and aggression towards Asian Americans grew with it. The recent shooting of 8 people in Atlanta, including 6 Asian women, is a testament to that. This surge of anti-Asian violence has brought with it the highlighted need for conversation starters, scripts, and tips for how we can discuss racism and empathy, compassion, courage to stand up in solidarity as we meet discrimination towards diverse populations head on. Given that one of our amazing podcast guests and friends of How to Talk to Kids About Anything, Christine Coe, just wrote an article on how to support kids through the latest wave of violence for CNN, I thought that she'd be the perfect person to interview on this topic so that we can provide all of you with what to do and say around this very tough subject. Christine Coe is a music and brain scientist turned multimedia creative. She is a fierce believer in the power of humans, small moments and actions, and vulnerable, authentic storytelling. She communicates on these beliefs through her work as a writer. Her latest work is in the Washington Post and Boston Globe magazine and CNN. She is the co-author of Minimalist Parenting, which we interviewed her on previously, and she is the founder of the award-winning blog Boston Mamas, podcaster for Edit Your Life and Hello Relationships, designer for Brave New World Designs, and creative director for Women Online. That woman is busy. You can find her at Dr. Christine Coe on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We are so excited to have you. So welcome, Dr. Christine Coe, to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Hi, Dr. Silverman. I always love talking to you. And so I'm just delighted. And I just want to say that I'm deeply grateful that you are tackling this difficult subject because it's not easy and it's been making many people uncomfortable, but in some ways, a really good and necessary way. So thank you.
I'm so glad you're on the line with me today. I think that this is something we have to talk about now. I didn't want to delay, and I'm so appreciative that you got right on with me. So before we jump into everything, for those who haven't read your article on this topic, and for those who are really waiting with bated breath to find out more information, can you tell us your personal origin story as it relates to Asian American violence and your personal connection with this tough topic?
Yes. Well, thank you for asking. And, it's funny because I think the reason this CNN story really kind of connected with people is that I started it with a story. I mean, you said in the intro that, authentic, vulnerable storytelling is what I'm about, and that's what this is about. And in the piece, I shared a story about when I was 7 years old and I was walking with my mom through a lovely, leafy, affluent Boston suburb, and we were attacked. It's funny. Back then, I had not used the language like attacked and violence, but thinking back, that's what it was. We were just walking along, and I I felt something hit me on the back of the head and heard some screaming, and I realized it was a group of teenage boys in a car, zooming by and screaming anti-Asian sentiments, and they had thrown full soda cans at a mom and a little girl walking along, minding their own business. And it's funny because when people were tweeting about this article and talking about how this was, my first experience with racism, I actually realized, well, actually, no, it wasn't. That was the first violent one. But, I can remember being as young as 6, a first grader, and my first grade teacher at circle time went around to ask people about their middle names, what they were. And when we got to mine, it's Korean, it's Kyung-hun. She started laughing hysterically and kept laughing until all the other kids joined her in laughing at me. And it took me decades to be able to say my middle name proudly again out loud, or just say it out loud and then proudly now. So I think that in hearing those stories, I think all of us know a little 7-year-old or a little 6-year-old. And I think that's why that opener was really startling to people. It just was like, wow, that's pretty ugly. So those are the earliest memories that I can recall.
I remember it, and I appreciate it. Actually, I talked about your story at my own dinner table, talking to my kids who are 10 and 12 currently about what happened to you, and wanted to just hear what they thought about it. And it was very shocking for them, not understanding why something so violent could happen and what would prompt it. And it made me think that one of the questions I really want to ask you is why this racism has been exacerbated over the years. More than 3,700 anti-Asian incidents have been reported since last March, according to Stop AAPI, citing everything from verbal harassment and physical assault to civil rights violations and online harassment, where women are reporting 2.3 times as much as of these hate crimes than men, and Chinese people being the largest ethnic group experiencing hate. The Pew Research Center details that about 4 in 10 Americans say that it is more common for people to express racist views about people who are Asian than before COVID-19, and about 3 in 10 Asian Americans reporting having experienced racial slurs and racist jokes since the beginning of the pandemic. And so while none of us have been living in a bubble, and we've all had to cope with the COVID virus in one way or another over the last year, what do you think exacerbated racially motivated violence towards Asian Americans over the last 12 months or so that so many more people are talking about it?
Yeah, well, I think, at a baseline, there's just sort of basic everyday racism. And when you hear of a situation originating somewhere, you sort of attribute blame. And then, to be quite candid, our leadership, I'm using air quotes, from 2016 to 2020 completely exacerbated that situation by, referring, using terms like China virus and Kung flu. I mean, that is stoking the fire in ways that are just right there. So I think, and I felt it too. I actually recall now that you were talking and I was listening to all these stats and sort of feeling both impressed by your collection of stats and also vaguely sick to my stomach. I was recalling an Instagram post I shared way back at the beginning when people were starting to make masks and think about masks. And I actually called attention to the fact that I was feeling panicky about masks because they sort of and I was panicky about wearing them before they were sort of mandated because I felt like I was drawing attention to my Asianness. And that, I already was feeling like a liability to my children walking around with them, which is a horrible feeling to have. So, those feelings are real, and the looks I was getting in those early days at the grocery store, I could feel it. It was not pretty, and these are in nice grocery stores, so it's really been everywhere and exacerbated by the previous leadership.
Yes, and that is really sad, that could be something that happens simply because people in leadership positions were saying, and as you said, stoking the fire. That is really scary that can happen. Now, there are some key messages that we need to impress upon children. Racism is up there as one of the most uncomfortable topics to discuss, as you mentioned before. I mean, there's a lot of taboo aura around this subject and a great deal of mistakes that people make. I mean, even as while we're talking about it, there's actually words we don't say. I mean, so it's almost hard to navigate at times. People make a lot of mistakes around this, about discussing it, but also around asking themselves and their kids to kind of put on color neutralizing glasses so that they don't acknowledge color or differences. I mean, that's like, we've gone to that other degree at times. So when we're talking about racism and being an ally, what are some key messages that we do want to impress upon our children?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, and I know how hard it is to talk about. I mean, your podcast is all about breaking down how to talk about the hard stuff.
Yes.
And I know there are so many things that are hard to talk about. I mean, it's funny. I often think about conversations about racism and the difficulty and discomfort parents feel sort of as similar to talking about sex and sex ed.
I couldn't agree with you more. I literally just wrote the chapter on sex, and then here I am like writing it on racism, and I'm like, there's so much that is similar about these topics related to that taboo feeling.
Yes. And what I always want to impress upon parents is that a big piece of this is dialing it back to basic human values where you're not even really talking about the thing, right? So for, one thing I talked about in that CNN article that I believe so deeply in is that a big piece of this involves teaching kids about empathy and looking for those little moments to teach kids that, like, we're all humans and that we have a lot in common, as well as having things that are different than us. And, I don't know if you or, for your readers who have read Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, which I recently read and have been telling everybody about.
I saw you recommending it. Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. And one of the things that she talks about is how a key reason that people could do horrible things to other people is when they dehumanize them. So our ability to find human connection and look for those moments of, empathy are such a crucial piece of parenting and raising kids who will have an inclusive lens.
And there's like looking for some commonalities, right? Like trying to, like, we're all human and here's some things that we have in common, not just looking at what's different, so that there's some bridges between people that maybe our kids hadn't seen before. So really asking not just about why somebody might be chosen to be picked on because of racism, because their name, because of how they look, but also what is it about that person that you have in common? What do you share, so that we see the humanness, and what do you like about that person? What's interesting about that person? Just bridging the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the conversations about what is different and what's wonderfully different, will come along the way. But the sort of likeness conversation is just a way to get kids in the door and adults who need it, quite frankly, with really understanding that, there is a common human experience and that we all deserve, respect and justice and, all of the good things.
And looking at it as, even on topics that, as you said, are not related to racism at all or race, but big feelings like, oh, that child looks really upset that child looks angry. That child, so what do you think is making that child angry or upset? What do you think is making that child feel scared in the situation on a playground, or that has nothing to do with anything but she fell on the ground and skinned her knee? So that there is something, and that shared experience, as you mentioned. I think that really does make some sense there. Now, I know that people are very interested in how to begin these conversations. And I'd venture to say that when parents talk about racism, I think especially within the last year, they're often, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people are often thinking about the struggles of Black Americans, the Black experience, because there's so much that has been going on, rather than perhaps the Asian and Asian American experience. But racism towards Asian people is real, and it goes back, very far. And people are being told things like, go back to where you came from, insinuating that Asian people are maybe a safety risk or a health concern. They're called horrible names. They've been objects of violence. How would you say we begin the conversations with children about racism and violence against Asian people, and the empathy you mentioned that diverse populations really deserve as they deal with fear and discrimination so often?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the focus on the racial atrocities towards Black people, I mean, it's warranted. And
it is,
I mentioned Wilkerson's book Caste, and I mean, I one of the things I took away from that book was a real sense of realization about the upper and lower caste systems in America. And Black people are in that lower caste sort of racial system here, whereas Asians are in the middle caste, right? So it's a little bit different. There is has been sort of more, I don't know if ability is the right word, but an ability to kind of assimilate, or an attempt to assimilate a little bit more. So I think it's just been different, and so I think, with talking to kids, I think one of the best things that you can do, I mean, our kids are consuming all manner of media right now. They are looking at books, they are looking at shows, they're looking at movies, they're looking at everything. So, the more that you can, I know it sounds sort of everyday, sort of pedagogical basic, but the more that you can integrate inclusive, diverse resources into your kids' library, the better. Because they just need to see, different humans that look different than them, humans that look the same, just represented in media. And, luckily there are, great, the resources continue to grow of, children's book authors and other things. And that's something you have to actively put in front of your kids and seek out. And I would recommend to anybody to connect with your local library if you can, because children's librarians are like unicorns.
Yes, they're the best.
And honestly, in the classroom, I mean, I would love to see a world where, inclusive literature was a major priority, but there are so many limitations on what teachers are, they're constrained by curriculum and et cetera. So I feel like a lot of times cultural integration becomes a little tokeny. It's like, let's talk about Black culture on Martin Luther King Day.
That's right. Right.
It's got to be
it's Black History Month. Therefore.
Yeah. It's got to be more than that. And it's on parents to do that.
Really important. And I agree with you. And it is a simple way of just integrating people who look different, but are experiencing, again, the same types of frustrations that everybody else is. And sometimes it does actually bring in some of these factors like racism in different ways. And that's a great way for us to have a springboard for discussion, because sometimes it's not always easy to know what to say in a particular moment. But when a character in a program or a character in a book is experiencing something, then sometimes we can ask questions based on what the child is seeing. Why do you think that's happening? What do you think is happening? And why do you think that child is angry or sad or feels alone right now? And just bringing those things up to kids, getting them thinking. I think that that kids can be very empathetic and have wonderful insights. I'm seriously often just still surprised by some of the things that my son comes out with that he thinks about related to these topics. And it's actually one of the joys that I have in talking to him about some of these tough topics, especially around racism, because he's just got a profound sense of justice. So he just thinks about these things. So I think it's good to bring these things in. I like the idea of bringing in the books and the programs.
And I do want to mention, I'm sure this has come up a million times on your podcast, but I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about like big, deep, crazy conversations. Right. The key to communication with kids, especially when they're younger, is quick, frequent touch points. That's what it's all about. Right. And, as you were talking about your kid and the sort of justice lens that they have, I was thinking that, one of the things I've been very committed to as somebody who received no sex ed as a child is, just being really open and honest with my kids about, sex ed and conversations about gender. And the other day, my 9-year-old asked me, what are the last acronyms mean in LGBTQIA? And I was like, I was just sort of astounded by her fluency with the language, but it's only because we just talk about it like it's not a big deal and as it comes up. And I think that's, one thing, like, I just want to tell parents, like, don't panic because you feel like you have to have a big conversation, because you do not. You just need to have little touch points, regularly.
Yes, I call them micro conversations.
Yes, I love that.
Yes, just micro conversations, and it may only be a couple lines long, and that's okay. And sometimes, it does go in more in depth, but I think they're just wonderful. And then at the end of many years, they have a whole host of information, and I think you're right, but they wind up asking things as easily as what's for dinner. Or even just saying things about my daughter's like, oh, this person told me she's bisexual. And, just of the conversation becomes so much easier when you give them the language and also the permission to talk about all kinds of things, that there is nothing taboo and we could just let it on out.
Yes.
Good. So we've been having conversations, as I mentioned, about racism and discrimination and violence against diverse populations for years in my family, and using things that happen in the news or when we've seen protests are jumping off points. Recent events over the last year have brought upon an urgency for more than just understanding and empathy, but also action. So I'm wondering about two kinds of action. One, what do we want to prepare our children to do if they see racism in action at school or on the playground or in their neighborhoods? What should they say or do? And then what can we encourage our children and families to do on a wider scale to help others who are dealing with racism and violence?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I think it's one that applies for both children and adults.
Yes, agreed.
I think that a really basic thing that is sort of the less scary kind of preliminary action is to just tell your kids how important it is to be a good listener. And, for adults to be good listeners too. It's listening to a friend, understanding what is happening and, and not sort of brushing over whatever their experience is. If they say, hey, something hard happened, listen. And, the second thing that's might feel a little scarier is, standing up for that person. I mean, this is just like, I think of it in the same way as, sometimes it is bullying, it could be direct. So, bullying could mean saying, hey, that's not okay. Like for this kid. And a kid can also be an ally by running to go get, an adult who can help deal with the situation, because, confronting bullies is scary. And I get scary. That, so I just want to say, I'm not telling parents, your kid needs to throw themselves in the middle of the fight. I mean, part of it can be going to get an adult to help. So that's really, really, really important. And then I think on a broader level, kids are they're so capable of absorbing and, being a part of things. And I think one of the interesting things this year, I mean, I have a grade schooler and like a teenager, and their involvement in the conversation, and whether and participation, whether that was going to sort of peaceful protests or whatever, they have a lot of possibility. So I think that if a protest is not your jam and it feels too people-y, I get that. And, so there are other things that you can do. You could have a little kid and they could raise money to donate to, Southern Poverty Law Center or something. You can talk about different organizations that work, for the justice of others. I mean, they're really simple conversations you can have. So we've done a lot of that just because, one of my businesses is, a t-shirt company that raises money for different organizations. So we've had a lot of direct communication on that particular topic, but it's a great one. It's a great one that you can have even if you're not, running some kind of business. And I've seen lots of kids start really cool fundraisers to try to donate to make a difference. And it's so empowering for them. It's so great.
Agreed. And sometimes I tell my kids that even standing next to somebody who is being picked on can be powerful. That you don't feel quite so alone, and looking to be that person, even if you're not wanting to say something. Because I acknowledge exactly what you're saying. That it can be hard to stand up for somebody and say that's not right, when you're feeling like, well, maybe I'm going to be put in the position of being attacked. But I'm wondering back at like that moment when you were in circle time and your teacher made you feel awful about your middle name and was laughing like that. I mean, if you could just go back to that moment, what would you hope somebody did?
I mean, it would have been great if somebody said, "Why are you laughing?" It would have been great if somebody just came over and, as you said, sat next to me or held my hand. I just felt so alone in that moment. And, I get it. Like, I mean, maybe my name just did legitimately sound funny to other people other kids, because it was different. But I think, I'm so glad you brought that up, because being an ally and being a good friend and being a loving person can take many forms. And, I will say that, in the wake of all of the things that happened, one of the most valuable things that happened was friends just sending me a message saying, "I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you. And you also don't need to respond." Just so they were holding space, but giving me space. And that was like so crucial.
Very powerful. Yeah, I can just imagine you feeling like this spotlight was being put upon you in that moment and feeling so alone, but sort of put on display. It's a very tough position to be in, and it bringing you back to that spot and talking about such a story, I think, is something that a lot of kids can relate to in different ways. Feeling like they've been put on the spot and feeling alone in a moment, and saying, well, what would you hope somebody did for you so you didn't feel so alone? This is how my friend Christine felt in this moment. What could you have done? And allowing them to respond to that, because it is a tough position to be in. I had read recently and had posted about the importance of simply being able to pronounce Asian names and making sure that, hey, like, this is not like one of those things where you just go, well, I don't know how to pronounce it, forget it, and just call somebody whatever they are. And I've had people say to me, "Oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter. You could just call me whatever." And I'm like, I'm not Robyn, so I want to pronounce your name correctly. So please, like, let's talk about this. And so even the gesture of pronouncing somebody's name and taking the time to try and pronounce somebody's name correctly in that moment, it can be powerful. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I just reshared, I think it was over the weekend. So if your listeners are not following The Conscious Kid on Instagram, they should. It is an incredible account that does just so much. I mean, education, fundraising, all manner of things to try to help parents raise better humans. But they shared a post from I believe it was a Korean woman who was talking about this very thing, that but with a different level or direction rather, that, many Asians over the course of the last decades have actually changed their
Yes,
names.
absolutely.
Like for assimilation or because people wouldn't acknowledge it. And so, yes, I mean, it's funny, as a fellow podcaster, I always, even if the name pronunciation seems obvious or, especially if it doesn't, I always ask because a person deserves to have their name pronounced and read correctly. So, it's interesting that that it feels like work, to pronounce a name correctly, but it matters so much. And I think the example that you just shared about talking to a kid about how would it feel if you, like that is, the sauce to, help kids see that perspective, because everybody's been in a situation where they've been embarrassed or something. I mean, it's a way to relate and help kids develop that empathy we're talking about at the top of the show.
There have been many times that I have assumed somebody's pronunciation and then still, of course, ask before we get started and have been completely wrong.
Yeah, of course.
Completely wrong.
It happens.
I just interviewed Janice Johnson Diaz, and she wrote a book called Parent Like It Matters. Before, when we first got on, and she is divine, just a lovely person, the way her name looks, it looks like Janice Diaz. So it could have very easily gone in that direction, and I could just, snowplowed through it. That's not her name. So, but she also had said she had taken on Janice for quite quite a time, and said, that she is just now reclaiming her name. And I'm like, you know what? It's a great name. Like, good for you to do that. Now, I was asked when somebody found out that I would be interviewing you because they saw the post and our interaction the other day. They got in touch with me privately and said, if you are interviewing Christine, please, could you ask her this question? So,
oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ready? So she's a friend of mine. She's a white mother of 2 boys who were adopted and are of Asian descent. So she is taking an interest in this from that perspective. I promised her that I would ask you about how white parents, and I would also say white teachers, white coaches, anybody who's in a key position for a kid, who are caring for, loving, advising, helping Asian kids thrive in today's world, how they can approach the topic of racism and violence against Asians and Asian Americans with their Asian kids, knowing that they're not in that same position. So how do we help them to cope? How do we keep this conversation going? How do we support these kids who may be experiencing anger, intense sadness, confusion, other big feelings due to recent incidents, given that in her case, as she's talking about, she hasn't experienced this same racism or discrimination or violence that they may have experienced or that they are watching being experienced by people who are there like, wait a second, that could happen to me.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your friend writing in and asking that question, because it is a challenging question, and the response is somewhat nuanced, as is always the case. But I would say that I think at a basic level, I think it's really important for us to not be afraid to have these conversations, because obviously and clearly bad things can happen. And so I'm not saying to have the conversations to strike fear in the heart of kids. That is not the objective. It's just so they're not caught completely aware. Even though my kids, quite frankly, they're biracial, and if they're with their dad, they could pass as white. I have talked to them very directly about, these are the things that are happening with your family of origin on my side. And, you may be privy to some slur or something in the future, and, this is a response, or this is, I give them some language about, how they could respond, or to go to a trusted adult for help, or, any of those kinds of things. And then I think the other big thing that parents can do is to really, model that behavior that you want to see in them too, and to be inclusive and to reach out and help and to do the things, support other people the way you would want your kids supported, so that they know that there are good people out there. I think that's one of the big things I think can be really scary right now for Asian families and Asian kids, is really not knowing who to trust. I mean, one of the things I shared about in the CNN article is how that experience as a 7-year-old crystallized this kind of stance for me where I'm just always bracing for racism. I'm always ready I always feel like there may be something coming at me from the back of my head or the front of my head, quite frankly. And that's like a really tough way to grow up. And I just wasn't ready. I had no information. I didn't know it was possible. I mean, I don't think anything can really prepare you for that, quite frankly. But I think the more we can just have gentle conversations to ease our kids in, the more they will feel like there are ways to deal with what's happening.
What is the language that you gave to your children if they did experience this? And what are they to do or say in that circumstance?
I mean, I think, obviously it'll depend on what's actually being said to them. But I think if it was some kind of slur, I guess one option is to walk away and just get help. I mean, that's always, one thing I've told them repeatedly is that these can sometimes be difficult battles to wage, especially if you're already in a vulnerable position as being a minority. But also if you're outnumbered, that is probably one reason my mom and I could not even fathom doing anything, is we were outnumbered by people, and they were in a car and we were on foot. So I think that's one thing is, you can always try to find an adult to help you. You don't have to fight this battle alone. You could, if you can't find one immediately, get yourself to a place of safety and then call me and I will come get you and I will help you deal with this. And I'm here for you. I think, as I think neither of my kids are, particularly confrontational, but, I've also said that, if somebody treats you badly, just respond in a way that you would go to bat for a friend who you really cared about and say, that's not okay to say those words. And, depending on the response, you may again have to go the trusted adult route or just extract yourself from the situation. And it's kind of a matter of safety. That's why I'm kind of not being sort of hard and fast about what to say.
I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's really tricky business. But, most of all, I want kids to be safe and feel safe. And, if that means extracting yourself from a situation, there is nothing wrong with that. You need to do, what will get you to a place of safety and then, call a parent and figure it out from there.
If you feel like your kids, because they've experienced this, or children who are Asian, and you've got, again, my friend is in my head, and their child is angry or having really big feelings about what's going on or what has happened to them, what would be your move?
If the kid is having big feelings?
Yes.
Yeah. I would sit back and listen. I think that one of the challenging things as parents is we always want to have all the answers.
Oh, we do, don't we?
Our job is to try to get educated to give the answers, but sometimes kids will just need to talk and they will need to vent and they will need you to sit and be quiet.
Yes.
And that empty space is okay. I think that empty space is very scary for us as parents, but that is where if you just wait, and oftentimes I'll just think to myself, okay, just take 10 internal quiet breaths and see what comes out. And oftentimes a lot of times actually something that I was not expecting will come out. So don't try to fill the silence, let them talk and let them have those feelings. And if necessary, help them get professional support. If they need, perhaps they need to connect with a counselor or a social worker or a school psychologist or some kind of level of support system, who is Asian American, who can, assuming they have the space to deal with it. I mean, that's another kind of tricky thing that you have to walk. You can't assume that any Asian adult around is going to be able to solve the problem.
Right.
But that could be a route to go if your kid is really experiencing serious distress, I would definitely recommend, if you're at a loss for how to support them, is to look for help.
I love the idea of holding space for them and really being in a position to listen, because that is often when children will come out with what they really need to say. Sometimes they're not ready to say it on the tip of their tongue. Sometimes they need some beats, some time. And perhaps also the message is, if they're not ready to talk right then, just telling them you are here to listen whenever they're ready, then that's the time to just leave that door open, so that they know that you're there.
Yeah. Can I make one more recommendation too on that?
Of course.
Which is, that I also think that conversations, it might feel a little safer, like in the dark when you're getting ready for bedtime, where you're not making eye contact and where they can just feel like it just feels a little less scary to have eyes on them. I've actually had some of my best conversations with my kids when we're either cooking, so we're like side by side or baking, right, or in the car.
In the car, so, yes.
Yeah, we're side by side, but in the dark, in the quiet of the end of the day, just before bed, like that can be a kind of magical space, and it can feel safe. They're at home, they're cozy, that can be a really good time. Follow their lead, but just give them that space. Is there anything that happened today that you want to talk about? Just that kind of thing, and just invite the conversation.
What I'm wondering is, and this is uncomfortable, but hey, that's what we're doing right now. It's uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable.
I've lived uncomfortable.
We're uncomfortable. Okay. A lot of adults have biases, and they can be very deep-rooted, and yet these same adults who may be listening right now want to change and grow, and that's why they're here. So what advice do you have for those adults who may have grown up in families that view diverse communities through a lens of racism, or they're not as good, or they've got something wrong with them, they don't know what they're talking about, they've got views that I don't agree with? How do they deal with those monsters in their closet right there and venture out so that they can get out of that box of limited views?
I think the very first thing is to pause and issue a moment of grace to yourself, and realize that the views that you have are based on what you have been taught, and as well as the sort of institutionalized stuff that's going around in society. So being willing and open to change is an excellent place to be. It's when you're just totally closed off and you refuse to hear anything. That's when we're we have a problem. So, I know there's a ton of guilt out there. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to feel like your people, I'm using air quotes, are doing bad things. So just, take a moment and say, hey, I am going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I'm trying. And that is really, really good. So I really I don't want to diminish the effort, because the effort is real. And then after that, I would say, it's funny, I had said for kids, expose them to different, literature and books and all this stuff. Same goes for adults, honestly, because I think there is the reason we gravitate towards the stories of our own, belonging system is because we gravitate towards what's familiar. That's like the human condition. So, watch movies, read books, learn about other cultures. If you want specifically, I think one of the best lenses into the Asian American experience that I've read is Kathy Park Hong's Minor Feelings. It's so interesting because it's kind of part memoir, part history lesson, part cultural commentary, and it is just fascinating. And I, for part of me found it highly triggering and kind of difficult, but then also part of me was like, wow, I am learning some stuff. So, we can always be learning. And there's so many resources out there. So I would just say, open your mind to learning. And there are tons of accounts. And I mentioned the Conscious Kid that has so much for kids, but also adults to learn. Just keep your eyes open. I also, there's one other account I want to recommend because she is just so beautiful in the way she portrays things. But on Instagram, there's a woman, her account is Oh Happy Danny with an I. And she translates, she's an artist, so she and an illustrator, and translates really challenging, tough, conversational racial topics into these gorgeous illustrations. So, it's a way, I guess my point is, look for different ways to expand your perspective. And, it's going to be a long journey. All of us are on, but we have to do this work, and our world is continuing to become more diverse. And so, the sooner you get on it, the better.
Well said there. That's a great way to look into it, because, some people are readers and they'll do that. And some people are visual and that's going to work for them. Some people will, expand their horizons by meeting people. I like that there's a lot of different ways to approach this and to gain the information. Some that's more active and going out and getting yourself infiltrated into the world, and others where you can be right in the cozy home and expand your horizons. Answer me this, just finish this sentence for me. The most important step we can take towards eradicating anti-Asian American violence is
listening. And I say that because I think what has happened over time is that the people have diminished the experiences of others or diminished the people themselves. And so I think a big part of what we need to do is listen. And, just as I was talking about holding space for kids to listen to them, I mean, we need to do that on the adult level in a big way.
That's really great. And something that it seems simple, but is sometimes hard to do. We like to talk so much of the time. So listening is so important. And it does say to somebody, I value what you have to say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Give us your top tip. What do you want us to come away with after listening to this podcast about this uncomfortable and tough topic, so that we can best help our kids thrive and we can best help our kids cope with this racism that's really become a problem?
I think my big takeaway and piece of encouragement would be to keep talking. Right at the beginning, you were talking about the phrase that you used, micro conversations. And I think that, there's a tendency, this is the nature of the news cycle, is something terrible happens and we all talk about it and there's a big flurry and then it goes away.
Right.
And these problems have been around for a long time. And so, I think we just need to stay committed to not letting this fall out of the news cycle and, just keeping gentle, loving, consistent attention on it.
Thank you for highlighting that. That is an extremely important lens to look through, that this has been happening for a very long time. And while it seems, wow, there's this new surge, it's nothing new. It is nothing new, but it is now, right in our view, and it's important to keep it there. So thank you for that. Give us the resource of the week. Where do you want us to go to get more information about you and the work that you're doing?
Oh, well, if it's about me, I mean, I mentioned a bunch of wonderful resources in this episode, but I guess the easiest way to find me is christineco.com. That link's everywhere. And I think my favorite place to chat with people on social media is Instagram.
Excellent. I know you do such a good job there. And I also will link your Instagram as well as the CNN article to the show notes that we always know we put at the end of this podcast. And in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for your insights and your strategies and coming on the show so right away to make sure that we keep this in the forefront given what's been happening, and so that we can learn and grow and make sure that we talk to our kids about that and listen to our kids about this important topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I appreciate you, Robyn. You are a light on the internet, and I'm really grateful to have gotten to know you over this pandemic. It's one of the highlights.
Thank you. For me too. Honestly, it absolutely has been. So thank you. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. So let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook, go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page, or let's chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/Dr. Robyn. I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman. And as Christine mentioned, she's there as well. And we will be going back and forth talking about this podcast. And I will be taking some of the amazing things she said, slapping them on a meme so that you can share them as you do, because I know how much it's important to have those great quotes in front of us so that we remember and we can share them. And if you love this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it so other people can learn about what Christine has been talking about, how we can help these kids and deal with this racism that's been in front of our face for a long time, but really is coming to a head right now, so that we can help our kids thrive and they can help those people in the community who are suffering right now. I truly appreciate it. I can't tell you how much those 5-star reviews have meant to me. Thank you. That's all the time we have for today, my fellow parents, leaders, and educators. Thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please go to drrobynsilverman.com. So many great podcasts are up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here, you're getting the information you need. I know it's not easy, but never forget there's always tomorrow. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. Perhaps you heard something today and you thought, oh, I haven't brought this up to my kids, or they asked me something and I just glossed over it. I shoved it under the rug. It's okay. This is the time when you can do it again. You can do it differently. You can bring it back up. No, nothing is done. Nothing is final here. We can always do a do-over. I see you and I'm right there with you. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you're 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.